then cut a really long story short, I came up with this nutritional model of modern disease. Oh, and I'm proudly the first person to describe that we know of. That the combination of sugar, refined carbohydrate, and polyunsaturated oils creates a perfect storm of inflammation, and inflammation sits behind all modern disease. And hence, everything's out of control in society from a health aspect, as well as most other things.
So, Gary, could you tell us about your health journey and how did you discover low carb and keto?
Well, that's a pretty open-ended question. I suppose my health story starts when I was a fat kid. Uh, Not by today's standards, but I can still remember the school swimming photograph where all these, tiny, skinny kids in the 1960s, and I'm the solid one. You
Mhm.
know, I wasn't grossly overweight, but I was definitely overweight. And I can remember as a kid, my mother putting me on diet after diet. I can still remember the Israeli diet, which was 10 apples a day,
Wow.
which was the diet, one of those diet things at that point in time. In retrospect, with everything I now understand, it was totally crazy. Um, but then lots of crazy things have been done over the years. So I probably struggled with my weight as a kid. I copped a bit of bullying as a result of that. So as you've probably worked out in my history, I've become intolerant of bullies, and the whole mechanisms that surround our entire health journeys are dictated upon us. So I've sort of learnt to handle that. And then I was a teenager, and I clearly outran my bad diet. I got taller, faster, and ran and sport and sport and sport. But in retrospect, I was on a highly inflammatory diet. I mean, I used to eat 4 liters of ice cream a week.
Wow.
But that was just, and I was a Wheat Bix kid and a cereal kid, and I was just throwing this stuff down, and I was bright red. I was very plethoric, um, easily sunburnt, and I'm pointing all these things out in retrospect. So you wouldn't know it, but we can go back onto why. But biochemically, I was probably a sick kid on paper. It's never tested, and I'd love to have gone back and played all that sport again now. But wouldn't we all like to be 50 years younger? Well, not you, you'd sort of be pre-born. But for me, that would be a different situation. So I struggled with my weight, but then over the years, practice, became a doctor, then a surgeon. Um, could still remember doing ward rounds, which would take 8 hours. So we'd stop and have uh, a break where we'd eat a whole big uh, jam-filled donut, but we'd wash it down with a Diet Coke because we knew that all that sugar, even at that point in time, wasn't that good. So we sort of justified it with a Diet Coke. Total madness. All I'm pointing out is how stupid we are in medicine. We're right at the coalface and not actually observing anything. uh, Married, 3 children, continuing to work as an orthopedic surgeon. And then my current, so if I go back 35 years, I was one of the first surgeons in Australia not to operate on smokers with elective surgery. I used to give a talk called "Where There's Smoke, There's Fire." There was enough literature around when you go searching for it to know that smoking had detrimental effects on your health. And but it took, another 10, 15, 20 years to actually get that accepted into mainstream. So now if you're a surgeon doing plastic surgery, reconstruction surgery, cardiac surgery, and in my case, orthopedic surgery with requiring a lot of bone grafting, it's okay now to say stop smoking. But 30 years ago, that was right at the coalface, and I had a whole lever arch files full of documentation to prove that when I got challenged in court. I never did, but it was pretty radical what I was saying at that time. Anyway, over time, I'm here in northern Tasmania. I'm retired now. But for probably the best part of 25 years, I started looking after the diabetic foot complications because nobody else wanted to do them. And ultimately, that just became my clinic, a huge part of my public hospital commitment, along with a lot of deep infection work. So my clinics used to be called Fetke's effed up fructose-free fungating foot folly Fridays. Never quite found out what the effed up meant. But essentially, if a patient was in all sorts of trouble, with deep infection, they'd come into my clinic, and I was pretty laterally minded. I could think about a few different things that we could do. But what I used to say to patients is, this is what I can do, but this is what you need to do. Putting some responsibility back on the patient. So I've been talking about health and weight and nutrition for decades. Excuse me. But then a crunch came with the diabetic foot complications, which was just, it was occasional patient, but then all of a sudden there'd be 7, 8, 9, 10 patients in my Friday clinic with the same problem: rotting flesh, pretty horrific. And it was sort of hopeless scenarios. And I had one guy in his 40s in hospital who I was looking at amputating both of his legs with type 1 diabetes complications. And he's in hospital. I'm trying to get control of these. I won't go into too much detail, but the horrible leg situation. And he's being given ice cream. I said, it was a WTF moment. I said, whoa, what the hell's happening here? And then I challenged that, and then I was told, oh, that's the dietary guidelines for hospital patients, even if diabetes, to have ice cream up to 3 times a day, desserts, morning tea, afternoon tea, chocolate cake, biscuits, snacks, breakfast cereals, and then breakfast full of sugar, lunch with dessert, dinner with dessert. And those guidelines are still there. So I've actually challenged, I've actually spoken at the National Food Guidelines, and I've given a lecture with their own documentation, and they said, no, that's not possible. So I just take out the parts of it and say, here it is. This is the dietary hospital food guidelines for inpatients in hospitals in most states of Australia. A couple are starting to modify that, but if you've got type 2 diabetes, you can have ice cream up to 3 times a day. Is it any wonder we're out of control? So in the process of that, I started challenging the system. I started looking into nutrition way beyond what we get in our own education, which is close to zero or completely conflicted at the very least, which is, what's happening right at this point in time. And then found that cut a really long story short, I came up with this nutritional model of modern disease. Oh, and I'm proudly the first person to describe that we know of. That the combination of sugar, refined carbohydrate, and polyunsaturated oils creates a perfect storm of inflammation, and inflammation sits behind all modern disease. And hence, everything's out of control in society from a health aspect, as well as most other things. However, that can never actually be proven, because I'll never be able to do a 100-year double-blind controlled study of identical twins having one diet and not another. However, in practical terms, if you've got poor metabolic health and you reduce your sugar, you reduce your refined carbohydrate, and you get rid of your polyunsaturated seed oils, then we see a dramatic reversal in a whole variety of conditions, not just how you feel, but we see weight control. Some people, it's about weight going up, but most people, it's about weight coming down. We see an improvement in liver function tests. We see almost immediate improvements in blood glucose control, diabetes control. We see improvements in mental health. We see, in a lot of people, prolongation of their cancers. So, slowing up cancer growth. We're seeing reversal of autoimmune disease. It's name a topic, name a medical condition which is not affected by your diet. And so at a simple biochemical level, that's where I came at this. You can have your opinion about plant-based or animal-based or whatever, but at a simple biochemical level, and this is where it creates controversy, but at a biochemical level, there is not a single biochemical pathway in the body that requires you to eat carbohydrate. Boom, end of topic. Not one. It is a luxury item in nature, which comes around seasonally at the end of summer, beginning of autumn when fruit becomes viable on trees. It's naturally available in honey if you're brave enough to climb up into a beehive. Again, that's their food source for their winter, and we go and rape and pillage the hive to actually take that. It's naturally available in breast milk. It is naturally available in grains. However, you can't eat grains until they're, in fact, highly industrially processed. And at the turn of the agricultural revolution, 10,000 plus years ago, you can see dentition, the teeth, and they're ground down while people tried to eat it. They couldn't actually eat much, but nonetheless, it was there. So we don't need there are no essential carbohydrates. There are essential proteins, essential fats, micronutrients, vitamins, which are all available from an animal-based diet. I'm not saying you can't have any fruits and vegetables. I don't personally have many, but you don't actually need them. And you can get everything. But if you go to a complete plant-based diet, then you are going to miss out on your nutritional requirements. Yeah, sorry, that's just the biochemistry. You're going to miss out on B12. You're going to miss out on iron. And then we're told, but there's vegetarian, populations right throughout Asia. Yes, well, yes, correct. But most of them supplement with some form of animal product, ghee in particular. They're cooking in an animal-based fat. And you're also looking at a population which have got significant iron deficiencies and malnutrition problems. So we're so fortunate here in Australia to actually have access to good food, be able to get a complete nutritional profile. Yet we still get it wrong. We know that because 90+% of the population are metabolically unwell. So they're not getting the complete amount of nutrients. And I think a lot of our appetite is actually related to the amount of nutrition we require. So you can eat a pizza on a Saturday night when you go out, you've had a couple of beers with your mates, you eat a pizza, it's full of calories. You've got so much energy from that, but it's nutritionally deplete. So on your way home, what do? You eat another pizza or you have a kebab or something like that. So we as our bodies chase nutrition, and because we're not getting all the nutrients in the diet, therefore we're consuming extra calories that we don't need. So when I started talking about this in the hospital situation, and then on this thing called social media, within 48 hours, I was targeted by someone who was working with Coca-Cola. Over time, I ended up being targeted by the Dietitians Association here in Australia, who were in a paid contractual agreement with the breakfast cereal industry to promote and protect the benefits of sugar and cereal to the Australian population. Again, that's another crazy moment. And the poor old dietitians in Australia don't even know that their parent body sold them out. And so they're repeating the propaganda that's pushed down their throats by their own organisation. But here it is. We had the minutes. I've been presented to Senate inquiries and medical boards and whatever. I was directly targeted for silencing because I was talking about not just avoiding processed food, but because I was recommending animal-based food. And hence, that's a whole lot of rabbit warrens that we've ended up traveling for the last, crikey, 15 years now. But but I'm still alive. But so my lectures have been, and podcasts and stuff have been seen 10 million plus times, which is pretty cool, from a backwater place called Tasmania. And we know it's serious stuff because they've been translated into Spanish, Korean, which was fascinating. A guy came up to me at a meeting in the US, said, "I've translated all your talks into Korean. Thank you very much." I went, "I can't find them, and goodness knows if they're academically correct, but nonetheless." Yeah. But we were approached by a couple of guys in Brazil who wanted to translate them into Portuguese, and they did it anonymously because they feared for their lives. And so again, I'm not being too dramatic, but we have been named in documents which are for targeting by multi-billion-dollar companies. So in other, less fortunate places in the world, we may not still be here.
Mm.
And then the recent misinformation mischief that's been put out by Eat Lancet, which has got its ties with World Economic Forum, has named me as the number one misinfluencer, whole new term,
Mm.
outside of the US and Europe. I'm disappointed to not get higher up, at number 1 or 2 with Sean Baker and a couple, Ken Berry. But everyone on that list is a dear friend of ours. And because all we've done is call out the nutritional aspects of Eat Lancet 1 in 2019, and the latest version, which has just been released with a massive fanfare around the world, has come out with a modified version of Eat Lancet 1. It's called Eat Lancet 2.0, but effectively, nutritionally, it's exactly the same. And when this has got the backing of major food corporations, pharmaceutical industries around the world, it is a low protein or low adequate protein, fundamentally flawed diet for planetary health and well-being. But I did some calculations on it. If we say that we at least need 1.5 grams of protein per person per day, the maximum I could find on their most relaxed diet, which allowed some animal-based product, was 32.7 grams of complete protein. It's going to leave everyone malnourished. And then the vegetarian and vegan groups within it are going to be completely malnourished. So Zoe Harkham's done great work on that. Just finished it yesterday. It's just, this is control, and so we're facing an issue. And I mean, this is it's not a conspiracy if it turns out to be a fact. It's one of my lines. And if you go down and wait long enough, you'd find out that a lot of things are actual factual. And we believe pretty strongly in a long-term concept that if you control the protein, you control the people. So controlling food source and food sovereignty is, a massive issue. Civilizations come and go based around food control, food sovereignty, being able to feed your people, feed your armies, feed the masses. And if you don't control that, then you succumb. And I'm a studier of history, not a great studier, but it's fascinating. But if you control the protein, you can keep people healthy or not healthy. And the concept of one of my favourite ones is crown land. The royals have held the crown land because they can go hunting and they can get their animal-based product. And the commons, the flat areas, the plains are given to the common people so they can crop. And the old quote from Marie Antoinette of let them eat cake, it's factually probably incorrect, but nonetheless it actually does mean, taken in context, probably let them eat their carbs, because it'll leave them with energy, but will leave them malnourished. Again, I'm drawing a long bow, but nonetheless, it's there in time.
Mm.
And Anthony Chaffee and I were having a chat a couple of years ago about this, and he pointed out that in the gladiatorial times, when there was a bit of civil unrest, they used to have bread days to feed the masses because the bread's full of sugar and carbohydrates. Carbohydrates, glucose and fructose get fermented into alcohol in the liver, and it subdues the people. If you have a huge carb meal, you'll feel a bit tired after. It's not your blood glucose going down. It's actually the fact that carbohydrates get converted into alcohol in the liver, and the cyclical paths of all that dependence. It's all there in biochemistry and money, and religious ideology. We can go on for hours about all of that, but it's all there. And if you do the opposite, and then eat fresh, local, seasonal, whole food based on your culture and environment, avoiding added sugar and processed food, that's my mantra. That's the dietary guidelines for the world. then you get improved health. And it doesn't cost as much as everyone says it does. Because, if it's fresh, local, and seasonal, that's when the stuff's cheap in your neighbourhood. So there it is. That's about as short as I can do it.
Yeah, that's awesome. And it all makes sense because unfortunately, if you're growing up in Australia, you're eating, bread, pasta, cakes, sugar, like it's just become part of the diet, as well as some vegetables. But it seems that red meat in particular and eggs are demonized for some reason. I'm just not sure how we've gotten to that stage.
Well, I'll just take the Eat Lancet. I calculated this the other day. If you look at the media release just on eggs, it says, I have 3 or 4 per week. Okay. Oh, it doesn't sound entirely unreasonable. But if you take apart, I think it's on page 25 of supplement 1 of this document, right? It's as boring as batshit to read. Okay, don't inflict it upon yourself. Unfortunately, if anyone's welcome to cross-reference me, cross-check. Okay, it says that you can have up to 1/4 of an egg per day. Well, hang on, 1/4 times 7 is 1 3/4. So, but the media release comes out as saying having 3 to 4 eggs per week. Well, hang on, that's just a factual lie. And I'm accused of misinformation or disinformation. I'm not. Okay, just fact check whatever I say. But here's this huge document coming out, the Planetary Health Diet, remembering it's been pushed out around the world, and Denmark last week just adopted it for their country. Right, so this is really pushing out the animal-based farmer, the local farmers. It's pushing them to the side, and we're going back to industrial food cropping, which is, I'm happy to debate the environmental aspect of food cropping, because that, animal-based food production puts nutrition back into the soil. Plant-based agriculture robs the soil of nutrition, and we can look at the Great Barrier Reef damage, and that's because of the plant-based agricultural system, not the animal-based. Look at the Gulf of Mexico. I think it was Gulf of America this week. The whole Mississippi Basin drains into that, and that is now just a dead sea with reduced oxygenation capacity because of the amount of silt and topsoil and chemicals that come down because of the plant-based agricultural system. These are just inconvenient truths. So if and then you can have, what was it? 6 grams of red meat, which is around about less than half a golf ball. So it's just a pathetic amount, and then you're supposed to get all and nutritional, but you're supposed to reduce our meat consumption, but bump up our milk consumption. So hang on, we got to get rid of cows for one reason and not another. It's just BS. I'm sorry. It's just, and you start looking at it and you're delving into it and you're going, actually, this is just a control mechanism pushed by the processed food industry upon the people for the benefit, ultimately, the processed food industry and indirectly the pharmaceutical industry. I know that sounds paranoid and whatever, but just the longer you're in this space, the more you realize, and it's just circular, the rabbit warren. You keep coming back to the same names, the same players, the same narrative about moving us from an animal-based agricultural system to a plant-based one. And because animal-based foods require refrigeration, plant-based foods require cardboard box, plastic bag, long shelf life, high profitability. However, the net loss, however, is to the individual who consumes that stuff. And that comes back to that inflammatory model of inflammation based around sugar, carbs, and seed oils. And when, I've debated this at numerous levels, discussed it at many levels. It's not just the sugar. This is what the sugar industry says. It's not just the sugar. And I've been inside a Coca-Cola meeting. paid my ticket money to get inside it, and then challenged them quite openly. It was quite a heated day. I didn't take my body armor, but I took a mate of mine called Rory Robertson. If any of you look him up, he's works for the he works for the anyway, national budget. Rory, sorry, I'm doing you a disservice. Anyway, it's just messy. These companies, their staff, they actually believe that sugar's healthy. I've done a beverage manufacturing course where at one point in time I had an idea that I'd actually, before I worked out it was fructose, that it was glucose as well. I actually thought about making up a new beverage just based on glucose, and because I thought when I started this, I thought it was all about fructose, but then I've realised it's about glucose as well. And the beverage was going to be called No Fruck or Fruck Off, and I had it registered for a long time. Fruck Off, you know. So you go to a pub and say, "Can I give me a bottle of Fruck Off?" You know, so. Because you need to have a weird sense of humour to do this, because you're constantly being kicked in the teeth by the system, by your colleagues who are going, "You've lost the plot again, Fetke." No, I'm sick and tired of losing legs. I'd rather lose the plot than lose legs. I've just come up with that. I might reuse that. There you are. You've got, and you know, as I say, once you see it, you can't unsee it. Once you start seeing that, literally by giving people with diabetes no sugar and no carbs, and giving them some protein in hospital and some healthy fats in the form of a piece of cheese and a full fat yogurt, you know, wow, that's radical dietary intervention. That's called cynicism for anyone who's not listening from Australia. Okay. Then, you know, that's all I was prescribing. I was, you know, writing on the chart, bought 2 eggs a day, cheese, full fat yogurt, just to see people's leg ulcers, foot ulcers start to heal with that minor variation. And so that's, you know, but then also to see the look on people's faces and see their lives turn around when they just change what they eat. And all they've done, you know, as a whole, we tend to pay more attention to what fuel we put in our cars and what we put in our bodies. And so there's no way you're going to go and put a bit of unleaded in with your diesel and vice versa when you get to the petrol. Oh, a little bit in moderation won't hurt. Well, of course it will. You know, it just has an effect. But the problem is, for the people and the wider thing, it's really hard to work out where the messaging is. You know, we've got the small group of us talking about animal-based product, and we've got the vast majority of people involved with the corporate play and the significant finances behind that, telling you the benefits of sugar and cereals and grains, fruit and veg, which has just been made up terms. There's a talk of mine called Fruit, Is It Good or Bad for You, which stemmed out of a debate that I did. And, you know, the amount of, the whole 5 a day was just literally just made up. It was just 1991 on the Baja Peninsula in Canada. And Zoe Harcum, is your friend, she sort of went, well, how did they come up with that, you know? So did they say, show of hands, how many fingers? Because in some countries it's 5 a day, some countries it's 3 a day, some countries it's 7 a day. It's just made up. And it was, you know, based on flawed information, flawed research at that time, suggesting that higher amounts of fruit and vegetables were associated with lower rates of cancer. What it was, when you went back, it was those of a higher socioeconomic grouping had a lower rate of cancer. It had nothing to do with their fruit and vegetable intake. The fruit and vegetable intake was a surrogate marker that they could afford to pay for the food to be transported in. And then over decades that followed, it's never been proven to have any effect, particularly in the EPIC trial, which lasted 21 years in Europe, looking at quintiles, you know, 5 groups of high to low fruit and vegetable intake, didn't have any effect at all on cancer rates. So again, these things are just, when you start chasing them down, it's a myth. But we're surrounded by myths, and if it's protected by corporate money to actually protect that myth for their profitability, hence here we are. So apologize. I can rave. I just a rant because that's
No, it's great. This is awesome. I'm just curious, what year did you discover keto and low carb, and when you started implementing that way of eating, what changes in yourself did you notice?
well. It sort of it wasn't like you can hear the term keto now, or
Hmm.
even low carb. But look, 15 years ago, that those terms really didn't exist. I mean, they did, but they weren't mainstream. You can go down the street now and say people, you know, literally the pub test. You can go to the pub and say, "Can I have a low carb beer?" And they go, "Yes."
Hmm.
So, um, I mean, there's a funny story in that. I came home, or not came home. I was doing the research, and I said to Belinda, "It's all the fructose. We've got to get rid of all the sugar in the house, and that's it." So I was going through the pantry and throwing out all the sugar. But I loved potato chips at the time, bliss points and all that sort of thing. And I went, okay. So we were able to have those, and then I worked out the seed oil component of it. And I went, oh, hang on, we can't have seed oils because they're actually got highly inflammatory. They've got a half life of about 4 years, so it's really hard to get them out of the system. So we've got to get rid of all the seed oils or anything with vegetable oil. So that had to get tossed out of the pantry. And then I think it was 2014, 2013, something like that, came across this thing called the polyol pathway, which is how glucose gets converted into fructose. And that was the kicker for me because that really cemented this nutritional model together. And that's when, so so effectively, if you're having, you may have a very low amount of sugar in your diet, but if you've got a high amount of carbohydrate in your diet and you're insulin resistant, which is what most of the population is to some degree, 40% of the glucose gets converted into fructose via this polyol pathway. Bang, all of a sudden we've created all this. Again, look at my talks on nutritional model of modern disease. It's all there with diagrams and easy for people to follow. I actually got into trouble with the medical board because my lectures were too easy for people to understand. Can't make this up. I said, "Would you stop making it easy for people to understand?" No, I'm trying to educate people. Um, Most people will go, "This is fantastical. This couldn't possibly be the case," but I can guarantee it all did happen. Then we had, so then I'd come home and said to Belinda, "Okay, now we've got to get rid of all the carbs, all the glucose in the house." And so you can imagine that each week there's a new rubbish bin full of food in the pantry getting tossed out. And to quote Karen Zinn in New Zealand, I love her little, very quick. If you want to do low carb, healthy fat, keto, it really means uh, empty pantry, full fridge. It's pretty well. Anyway, I said to Belinda, okay, sugar's gone, seed oil's gone, all the carbs are gone. This is the way we're going to eat. She looked at me, she said, if you come home once more, if you take the bacon out of the fridge, you're out. Still remember it. You take and yeah, bacon's nowhere near as bad for you as everyone's making it out to be. I'm not saying go and eat truckloads of it. We're very fortunate to get access to pretty good quality cured meats. Remembering cured meats have been around for thousands of years. They're preserved with salts and a variety of things for thousands of years. We are here because of our ability to eat meat beyond the point of actually harvesting the animal or killing the animal. So it's but and when you start challenging any one of these topics, they're just houses of cards. You know, meat's bad for you. Meat causes cancer. Meat's bad for the environment. Meat makes you masturbate. They're the big ones, and they've all come from religious ideology, a Seventh Day Adventist church. And they also came up with the breakfast cereal industry. They came up with the modern Western soy industry. They came up with the modern meat industry, fake meat industry. They came up with the term breakfast is the most important meal of the day. They've come up with our food guidelines back in the US, Australia, Western world, Seventh Day Adventist Church, plant based, religious organisation, corporate church. have brainwashed their members into believing this message of Ellen G. White that we've got it, that meat is bad for you, even though she ate meat until she died. But he says, one rule for the people, one rule for the leaders. And then that's literally pushed down our throats because the education of our children in the schools is dictated by these pathways. The health star rating system here in Australia, the algorithm was written by Sanitarium, which is a Seventh-day Adventist church-based organisation. So people go to the shops to look at the health star rating on the food, not realising it's been written by the processed food industry. Do you know how they work out the health star rating?
No.
So I find this really interesting because you work out how some things can have 4 stars and 5 stars, and full cream milk gets 1. So first of all, it's written by the processed food industry, and it's a food category. It's not based against anything else. It's based against a food category. So if you look at breakfast cereals, that company will actually maybe produce in a test laboratory this breakfast cereal. I'm just going to make up a number: 80% sugar, right? 30% petrol. I'm literally just making up this fake, horrible stuff. Yeah. And then that's put in the food category against the breakfast cereal. And that the breakfast cereal gets 5-star rating because there's a product there to be tested against, which is so damn dangerous. So it's got nothing to do that it's 5 stars better than something else. It's that outside of that food category. It's literally within the food category. So it's all just make believe. Again, if you pick up a product and one's got a 1-star rating, another one's got 5-star rating, the average consumer, and I'm not being harsh when I say this next thing, 49% of the population are functionally illiterate. They can't read the wording on a package. This has been well studied, well documented. We've presented this data to Senate inquiries as well. So this is functional literacy rates. Therefore, if you put a stars on a package, people will think 50% of the population, 49% of the population will believe that product is healthier for my child than the one with 1 star. It's just that's the way it is. We presented to a Senate inquiry onto food labelling. So as a result of that, the plant-based food industry is no longer allowed to put a picture of a chicken, a cow, or a pig on their plant-based burgers or sausages or whatever. But again, is it any wonder that the big processed corporate food industry is trying to work that they get maximum profitability? It's rhetorical, sort of.
Yeah, I find it fascinating. Even going to the supermarket, the fattier beef mince, like a 2-star beef mince, is cheaper, and the 5-star mince, which is meant to be healthy, the leaner beef mince, is much more expensive. So I find that really fascinating.
No, it's great. Because I buy the cheap mince. I say to people, get the cheap mince.
Mm.
You don't need to cook it in anything because it cooks in its own fat.
Yeah, and
And it's probably got a bit more gristle and other stuff in it, which is probably to your nutritional benefit.
Mm.
Not filled with sawdust. Unfortunately, most of the beef minces you'll find at the supermarkets are 10% water. You know that trick where they just pump them with water to actually. And if you want to find proof of that, get a kilo of mince from your supermarket and get a kilo of mince from your butcher. Put them in the freezer, and then when you thaw them out, cheap mince from the supermarket will be having 10% water. Sorry about that population. It's still better than having the expensive mince.
To the people that follow a plant-based diet and they feel they can get away with that because you can supplement, with omega-3s and B12, protein, etc., that's not the equivalency of getting it from animal-based food, is it?
But I don't. They can't supplement their protein. They can have protein, but it's going to be plant-based proteins, not animal, or they'll be incomplete. You can't. It's if you want to be vegan on this pathway, you are going to be nutritionally depleted. You might get there if you eat a whole lot of oysters. It's just sort of one of the side because they don't have a nervous system, so a vegan can eat them, but most vegans don't eat enough oysters to get their nutritional requirements. But being vegan, and again, people can do whatever they want for their own choices, but when you realise most of the vegan propaganda has got its origins back in the Seventh Day Adventist Church. Look at any of my wife's work on this, Belinda Fettke. Just we've been tracking this for 10 years. Dietary guidelines, vegan propaganda, animal-based, hits, commentary around the benefits of plant-based and the terrors of meat-based, all have their origins in Seventh-day Adventist religious ideology dating back to the 1800s. And it's gotten into the narrative. It's the belief that's there. But they are going to be nutritionally depleted. The only way you can be vegan and not become nutritionally depleted is you are going to be incredibly elitist. You're going to be expensive. You're going to be putting a lot of food miles on your food. You're going to require supplementation, which is going to come from highly processed sources. You're going to be needing to have your iron infusions to actually maintain your iron levels. And all of this is just hypocrisy. I'm sorry. I get it. I actually have, I'm sort of starting off negatively, but people with poor health, I have this, one of my talks, I talk about the evolution of diet in this Western world. So essentially, if you're unhealthy, plus or minus obesity, metabolically unhealthy, I'll take my own journey. I decided, actually, I need to get my act together here. I'm carrying too much weight. I'm unhealthy. So then I ate by the food pyramid. Ultimately, I say in my comment there is, if you eat by the food pyramid, you'll die by the food pyramid. Along the way, you'll look like it. And I upped my exercise, did all that. But I was still getting fatter. Okay, this can't work. So then I moved towards low carb. I moved towards low carb and healthy fat. And some people will move beyond that to keto, it's hardcore. And then some people will, for health reasons, move all the way to carnivore. And then flip backwards and forwards a little bit in that cycle up here. But there's another group of people who get sick and then they believe in, they're worried about the planet as well and everything. And then they swallow the vegan narrative. They're well-intentioned. They're trying to get an improvement in their health, believing in the bigger picture of the planet. We can almost finish on some methane stuff I've got for you there. But but then they'll do that for a while. They'll actually get healthier. They get healthier because they've taken a whole lot of crap out of their diet, and they'll go, "Wow, I feel great." And they've got this holistic feeling that they're doing the right thing by the animals and the planet and all that sort of thing. But over a period of time, they will get function. They'll become unwell because they'll be nutritionally depleted. And I know of several people who are very high profile in the low carb keto community who used to be vegan. Now, highly intelligent people who have actually gone on that pathway and then realize, hang on, this doesn't work, and then come back to actually eating a nutritionally complete. And so they get that, the vegan people end up on that pathway, end up having to put some animal-based product back into there, and then they'll end up on the same pathway that I did. So I think they're well-intentioned, they're well-meaning, they're trying to do the right thing by themselves and the community and the planet, but it's full of propaganda which is going to leave them sicker and the planet sicker, in my belief. So you can't be vegan and be healthy. Anybody who says that is not being tracked for long enough. There are some religious communities in the world that are arguably vegan and not really. and the Jain are probably a small group, but there are no children in there. The population are infertile, and it's a decision you make as an adult to go into that pathway. But even the Jain will receive ARMS, ALMS, from people, which will have some animal-based nutrition in there. So they can sneak it in. It's just, you can't do it. It's without significant supplementation and long-term, detriment. Despite the propaganda saying that you can. When you find out a lot of the longevity material, saying, "Oh, you'll live longer on all this." Well, again, a lot of it's written by the Adventist Church. The Adventist health studies are all there, but they keep quoting themselves back. So from a literature point of view, it's got hundreds of citations. It's only because they requote their own material. And then it becomes a narrative. Oh, this well-documented, well-cited article says about the benefits of vegan vegetarianism. But if you actually go into the Adventist health studies, the definition of vegetarian was that you didn't have meat more than once a week, sorry. And vegan, you didn't have meat more than once a month. Hang on, that's not the narrative we get in the press. Vegan is no meat at all. But the studies themselves, which are flawed to the nth degree and come up with some flawed data, even those Adventist health studies define veganism as still allowing you to eat meat. Well, hang on, that's not a narrative. But the trouble is that narrative of a plant-based diet is now getting, it's all, not all, the vast majority of the back-end material on doctors' computers here in Australia has been kindly supplied by Kellogg's and Sanitarium, which is all pushing a plant-based narrative. You've got irritable bowel, have more fibre, have more grains, have more cereal. You've got heart disease, have more fibre, have more grains, have more cereal. You've got mental health problems, have more fibre. It's the same sheet. It just changed. And then here in Australia, this is some of Belinda's recent research. There's a program put out by Life Education, which is Healthy Harold. A lot of us were exposed to Healthy Harold. Healthy Harold's a big giraffe that goes around and tells how everyone to be healthy. Life Education run that program, and they have ended up in a paid agreement with Sanitarium to provide plant-based food narrative to every child in every school in Australia. It's a paid agreement. We've actually been, some parents have spoken to us about their children have come home from school saying, "We can't eat meat, Mummy.
Wow.
We've got to eat plant-based." But that's just what the message they're getting at school from Healthy Harold. And we're letting you know, Life Education signed an agreement where Sanitarium, Seventh-day Adventist vegan corporate church entity, have funded Life Education to actually promote that product right through the school education services. At the same time as they signed that, they had a memorandum of understanding with Brands Off Our Kids here in Australia, so that Life Education would not promote a corporate brand to children. Belinda pointed this out to every board member. Every board member got a letter. The board got a letter. She never got a response. 6 months later, Life Education severed their ties with Brands Off Our Kids. So every kid in Australia has now been sold out to the processed food industry.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Well, it's ridiculous, but that's what's happened. It's not, but I mean, the most important thing is information. If you're armed with this information, you can go to your school board and school parent friends meeting and saying, "Look, we don't want our children to get education on food from Healthy Harold." Sure, giraffes can eat plants because they've got a different digestive system. That's what. It's not for our children.
Yeah, exactly.
Because cows are being blamed for everything. Methane and climate change and whatever. There's a great book called "Cows Will Save the Planet," and I really like it because it's actually written by a beef farmer. She's a lawyer, and she's also vegan. It's really just like I like finding narratives which are pushed, told actually the benefits of animal production, even though that person you'd expect them to be in the other camp. Uh, so many stories about methane um, and computers, AI. So we're now putting these major AI computer banks are requiring significant amounts of energy, and some of them are now being fired on LPG and also being cooled on LPG, which is significant amounts of methane. We're not blaming our AI computers and our search engines for global warming now. We're still blaming the cows. I still remember Belinda and I driving down a highway. It was a 200-kilometre traffic jam between Noosa and Brisbane, both those, and 6 lanes of traffic just come to a standstill. I can't remember what was going, why there was traffic accidents and stuff. Anyway, on the side of the road, there were 4 cows in what would have been 100 acres of land. And I looked across at her and I said to Belinda, they are clearly the cause of climate change because there are 1,000 cars, we're all their engines going, but we're going to blame the 4 cows. And here's a little beautiful figure for people if they want it. What accounts for 27, I think it's about 27% of the methane production from the animal kingdom? Termites, scarab beetles, millipedes, and cockroaches. All right. So the biggest producers by far as an entity of methane production on this planet are termites, scarab beetles, millipedes, and cockroaches. And we know how long the cockroaches have been around. Okay, so we're going to go around and kill every cockroach and every termite rather than restore our health and well-being by having an animal-based product. It's just ludicrous. But everyone, please fact check me, okay? Just leave a message for Todd saying, "Don't get that guy on. He's full of nonsense." No, it's all there.
Yeah.
And a lot of everything, any one of these things I talk about, put them in my talks. If you see on the bottom, they're all referenced. They're all there. Quite interesting. A few of those references actually disappear, but there's over time. To the more challenging ones. But then you can go on to a thing called the Wayback Machine, archives.org. Encourage people. If you want to fact check me and you can't find it and can't find my reference, go back to archives.org, whack the things in, you'll find them there. Pretty hard to wipe something off the internet.
Yeah, exactly. Gary, what does your menu look like from day to day? What sort of foods are you eating?
Empty pantry, full fridge. Yeah, it's complicated, but it's boring. Like I'll get my adequate amount of protein in per day. I'm the laid back low carb. I can't tell you how many carbs I have, except very few. Can't tell you how much protein I have apart from what I need. How much fat do I eat? What my body tells me. It's really interesting. Once you get rid of the sugary foods and the ultra processed foods out of your diet, your body will tell you that. So for breakfast, I will have often have a little omelette and a sandwich maker. Everyone wants to know what I eat for breakfast. Like with crikey, if I eat my 4 wheat bix for breakfast in the morning with a couple of teaspoons of sugar, which a lot of people do for 50 years without, and they don't think that's boring. So I can put the kettle on, put a sandwich maker on, little ring in there, put in last night's meat, egg, cheese. If there's any vegetable in the fridge that may or may not sneak in, and then cook it. By the time the tea's boiled, then I've got a hot breakfast. Season it, salt, pepper, that'll go. If you're really, really desperate to actually put that into something called a sandwich, then put it in the lettuce leaf or a bit of cabbage leaf. That's just transition, because that's all bread is. Bread's just a method of transporting food from your plate to your mouth. But I don't know. Whereabouts are you in Australia? You're in.
I'm in Melbourne.
Yeah, so down here in Tasmania, we've got this new invention. I don't know if you've got it up there in Melbourne. It's called a fork. So fork, you use the fork, and It's really useful for moving food from your plate to your mouth, or you can use 3 fingers, which is a fork. And then I'm a great believer that you need to spread your protein out during the day.
Mhm.
Um, Lovely lady, she's a dietitian, pointed something out to me. I've forgotten her name. She gave me a talk, and the salient point I took away from it is our bodies can really only manage about 30 to process about 30 grams of protein at a time. So this goes against the 1 meal a day concept. People say I'm 1 meal a day and fasting. Um, and if you're trying to get, let's say you're 80 kilos, you want to get 120 grams of protein, you're going to need to get 120 grams of protein. If you have it in one hit, you're only going to be able to metabolize 30, maybe 40 grams of it. So I prefer to break that up. So I will be having my eggs, cheese, meat for breakfast. My snack during the day will be a cold sausage or a cold meatball. I'm a great believer. We have meatball Mondays that last till Thursdays. Forget the meatless Monday, which is meatball Mondays. So my go-to snacks will be a meatball, be a cold sausage. We had family around on the weekend for something, so we bought an eye fillet steak. And again, all of this sounds really expensive. And like we will have some eye fillet from time to time. I'm not the guy eating T-bone steaks 3 times a day. Cheese is a wonderful source of protein and healthy fats. It's just, and people say, oh, it's expensive. No, you can go down and buy a piece of what's now cheer. It used to be called coon cheese. You get a kilo for $13. I've even found some at Coles the other day. You can get, it's $10 a kilo. Wow, what a superfood! So on the whole, we've always got eggs in the fridge. We've got some leftovers. Cook once, eat thrice. And so we last night for dinner, Belinda, wanted some veg in there, so we cooked up some mushrooms and some cauliflower. That's and we do have a granola, nut granola, which is very low carb, and we'll have that with double cream. Um, and I metabolically, I know what my HbA1c is. I know what my fasting insulin level is. For me, it's improved my health. We know it's improved the health of others. I'm sorry to everyone. I'm still ugly. Can't do anything about that. But I'm better and healthier, mentally active. And that's not just my story. It's a story of hundreds of thousands of people now. When you start going across, when you restore your health by putting the right fuel in your tank, wow.
Mm.
It's just so dumb what we're doing at the moment. You put the wrong fuel in your tank. We put in the car in for a service, going, there's something wrong with it. Welcome to every general practice in the world. Wrong fuel going in, and therefore there's problems. Restore the fuel, restore the protein, restore the complete protein, and then see what's going wrong after that. That's all we're actually advocating. And we think it's pretty simple, but here we are still having to talk about it. Yeah, and that's my naivety. I thought this would be all over 15 years ago. It's not hard. An orthopedic surgeon can understand this biochemistry. It's just I keep shrugging my shoulders, going, well,
Yeah, it's one of those things. People keep hearing the same narrative over and over and over again, and they assume that's correct.
So well, that's called propaganda.
Yeah, exactly.
We've studied this. It's called, if you have a message of fear and you repeat it and you control the narrative, you control the media, and you combine it with theatre, then you can change people's thoughts. And we've studied this through religion, through wars. I'll even take Healthy Harold on that at the moment. Okay, you have a message of fear. Meat is bad for you. Meat causes all sorts of troubles, and you control the narrative because you're now controlling the educational space for every child in Australia. You repeat the message of fear. You control the narrative. You control the education, and you use theatre with Healthy Harold, this healthy giraffe bouncing around your school playground. There it is. It's called propaganda, and that's how you actually, repeat, 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 repeat. And we just keep, as I say, you just poke it. It's a house of cards. And this is right through medicine. It's no wonder people are getting distrust of the medical system, or what I call the sickness industry, because doctors are saying dumb stuff. Doctors are saying, look, here, have this medicine. Well, what about my diet? No, have this medicine. It's quicker and easier for me to get you in and out of the office. And I'm happy to cop criticism from my colleagues. And 1% of my colleagues are with me, and 99% of them are just continuing the old pathway. And that's sad. That's sad. I've got a bit of hope for the future, though. I've given some lectures to national bodies of medical students. The first time I gave that was several years ago, and I had 2 students come up to me at the end saying, "What do we do now? We've swallowed the red pill. What do we do now?" And so last time I gave it was last year, Marvel Stadium, several hundred medical students, and about 30 of them followed Belinda and myself out and we couldn't get away for an hour and a half, 2 hours, because they wanted to know more. How do we do it? What do we do? What do we do? How do we question this narrative? So there's hope for the future. So I was delighted with that. It was pretty easy to get despondent in this, going, why am I the only one still banging on about this? Because it's more than that. There is a generation coming through going, hang on, maybe there is something mischievous going on with our education. Hopefully they'll still be questioning in 30 years' time.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks so much, Gary. I want to be respectful of your time. What's the best way for people to reach out to you? What social media are you on?
Oh, look, I'm on Twitter. I'm a bit naughty there. I'm not nearly as active as I was before, because the message is there. We did podcasts like this. Most of my talks are on YouTube in some respect. Belinda's work is amazing because I'm talking about science and trying to make it simple. Belinda's talking about the vested interests.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of my lectures, I often put up a picture of a Monopoly board. A lot of us, we've all played Monopoly at some point in time, but you can't play Monopoly unless you know the rules. And so what we do now is we give you the rule book. If you understand everyone you're playing against, you understand what hat they're wearing, whether or not they know it themselves or not. Or if you don't agree with me, I'm not so interested in you agreeing with you. I'm interested in how you've come to your opinion. And it's not hard to find the vested interests at play. That's what I find really interesting.
Mm.
And again, people say I've been shaped by the narrative I've heard, but apart from one paid lecture to the meat industry, everything else I've done is, just paid expenses, and that's it. So I'm not in anybody's corporate pocket. Look, it's so if you want to find us, you'll find us. You found me. There you are.
Yeah. There you go. All right. Thanks so much for your time, Gary. I appreciate it. Thanks for sharing your knowledge with us.
Good luck, Todd. All right. Thanks, mate.